Welcome to the Education Leadership Podcast, where we bring stories, advice, and insights from world-class leaders right to you. Welcome to the Education Leadership Podcast. I believe that when leaders level up, everybody wins. Their team, their family, their community, and even themselves. Now, most leaders have strong values. They know what they stand for. But values alone don't tell you what to do when the world gets hard. They don't carry you through change or conflict alone. They don't help you lead when nothing is clear. That's the gap. Not character, but skills. The kind that hold you up when the ground keeps moving. Our guest is Simon Whyte, founder of Weave Leadership. He's led across commercial and for-purpose organizations in New Zealand and internationally. He's seen what separates the leaders who hold it together from those who don't. By the end, you'll know what durable leadership looks like and where to start building. So let's get into it. Well, Simon, welcome to the show. How are you, my friend?
I'm well, Parsi, and I feel very honoured to be here. I think the work that's education and what you're doing with these podcasts is just fantastic.
Yeah, well, likewise, vice versa as well. I admire the work that you do with Weave Leadership. I remember attending my first breakfast networking event at Weave Leadership, and it was so cool to hear from different leaders sharing their experiences. I walked away with a lot of value, felt very inspired, and I was like, man, I got to have the person who founded all of this on the podcast eventually. So it's so cool to have you here. But look, our first question, just to add value to our audience straight away, is what's one thing you believe about leadership that most people disagree with?
Well, perhaps not disagree, but misunderstand, I think, is probably how I'd frame it. But I think leadership is very situational, and it's a lifetime journey of learning and adaptability. It's not, you're not suddenly anointed as a leader. You are a leader, but the real task is to become the best leader that you can become yourself. So that's my view of leadership. I don't consider myself a great leader. I consider myself a great student of leadership. I'm fascinated by it.
Yeah. Well, that's what, great leaders are great learners, right? Always students. Hey, but that's cool. I believe in that. It's situational. Depends on the situation. And so pretty keen to go a little bit more deep into that in this podcast interview today. But I want to start with Weave Leadership because I really like that. Right? I've never heard that anywhere, but I understand what weaving means. But I feel like there's more behind the name, right? So tell us about Weave Leadership and what does it mean?
Well, Weave is about supporting and helping the development of modern New Zealand leaders. And I think it's probably my aspiration is best summed up by a whakatoaki that I got Andrew Baker of Tika Learning to help me with. And Andrew is an expert in helping corporates embrace Te Ao Māori in a way that's relevant and meaningful for that particular corporate. And I had a session with him. He's been very helpful for me personally on my own journey. But he pointed me to a whakatoaki by the Reverend Manahuia Bennett, who was the chaplain of the Great Maori Battalion in the Second World War. And Manahuia Bennett ultimately was awarded the Order of New Zealand, great Maori leader. And his whakatoaki, or proverb, was Te kai atu rangatira, e kolero. And that's really our strapline for Weave Leadership. The food of chiefs is communication. And then the proverb goes on and it says the mark of a chief is how they treat their people, how they look after their people. And then kai atu rangatira, and then the task of a chief is to weave the people together. So the concept of weaving is about weaving the individual and their business together, but weaving people together and also weaving businesses together. So that's really the foundation of what Weave is all about. And it's very much like that. It's really a community more than a business in some respects. And we create a space which hosts chief executives and senior business leaders to come every month. And I've got members that have been coming every month for 7 years now. So that's what it's about.
I love it. that whakatauki, so what was it again? So the
Te kaia te
food,
rangatira is
yeah,
the mark of a chief.
the mark of a chief is
Sorry,
the food of a
the
chief
food
is communication. The mark of a chief
is
is how they
look
treat,
after their
how they
people.
look after their people. And then the task of
the
the
task
chief
of the chief,
is
or
to
the job of the
weave.
chief, is to weave the people together.
Wow.
And that was something that the Reverend Manahuia Bennett lived, and he did it in a way of a great leader. So, you know, the groundings are pretty simple. If our objective is to weave people together and create high-performing teams, or creating a high-performing country, it's about how do we bring people together,
I love it.
because I don't think it can work any other way. Successfully, you can delude yourself. You think you're successful, but you're not. Yeah.
I love that. I love that concept of weaving. There's a lot of analogies and principles.
Yeah.
And also at the same time, I know it's easier said than done. There's a lot of,
very,
you know,
very
to be able to do that. But before we get into the whole,
Yeah.
you know, how do we weave as
Yeah.
leaders? Our audience loves the stories of our guests,
Yeah.
right? So where did you start? You know, what inspired you to found Weave Leadership?
I've got a very eclectic career. I started as a commercial lawyer in big law firms in Auckland and spent a bit of time in London. I soon realised that law wasn't for me, and because I wanted to make decisions. I didn't want to just advise people. I actually wanted to make decisions, I think, and I didn't quite know what that meant. But I started on this career in corporate, and I worked for a range of different large corporations. And then progressively I started doing more in the for-purpose space. And one thing that was constant throughout was that I found that people always approached me for advice or what did I think or ideas. And so I had this kind of natural, I mentored a lot of people formally and informally. And I think I just got really interested in people and what made them tick. And I learned a lot through my own experiences. And then I got a call one day from a large organisation similar to Weave, and they asked me to be a chair of one of their groups. And so that's how I started. I actually started hosting these groups. Had no ground rules, didn't really know what I was doing. Thought I'd run out of speakers after 6 months and it'd all be done, and here we are 7 years later, still doing it. Yeah, I love it. It's fantastic. It's a way of keeping me up to date with the latest thinking. I'm hunting on LinkedIn the whole time to see who's doing different things and who also kind of resonate from a values basis. So for me, that's what Weave's all about, and I get a lot of enjoyment out of it. Not just meeting the people, but working with the people as well. I don't do any consulting work inside their business. It is purely a forum for these people to come and talk to each other, and they still come.
Wow, that's awesome. That is fantastic. You know, I love that journey and where you've come from. You've worked in international and led in international organizations, also domestic as well. You would have learned a lot, right? What's something that you've seen in yourself as a leader grow and develop because you've worked in these different spaces, both international and domestic? Because this will be good for our audience.
Yeah, sure. I think one of there's always an importance to have leadership development training because it helps put in place structure around how you lead, I think. For me, my first line management role was when I was at Sky City. I was the general counsel of Sky City when it first opened. And it was run by Harrah's Entertainment of the US at the time, and it was their first international venture. And I had I didn't have enough work to do as the general counsel. You know, as a big American corporation, they thought they had to have a big in-house counsel role, and they didn't. And I went to see the boss of Harrah's that ran the property, and I said, I don't have enough to do. And he said, well, what would you like to do, Simon? And he gave me a responsibility for opening the Sky Tower. And so I project managed the operational opening, so getting the restaurant up and going and staffing it, and the tourism side of it, I got it going. And it was great. I was kind of just feeling my way in terms of it and focused on the people. And then that was very successful, and he came to me afterwards and said, "I'd like you to run the whole non-gaming side of the business." And that just kind of knocked me for six, because I saw myself as a lawyer. I'm just a lawyer. What do I know about this? And I remember at the time reflecting on it and understanding, hey, what's the situation here? You're a lawyer. What are your skills? What do you know and what you don't know? Now, the non-operational side of Sky City would cater for up to 25,000 people for lunch or meals every single day. On a public holiday, 25,000 people would buy meals at Sky City. And I realised, well, Simon, what the hell do you know about catering? And I suddenly realised to understand that the importance of the situation. What's the situation? And it didn't scare me, because I thought deeply about the situation and understood where my strengths were and what were the strengths I had to get around me to be successful in this role. And that was pretty much how I did it. So we'd have 35 trucks a day coming into Sky City full of food, and I wouldn't see any of them. It would go into a central kitchen, and all this food would be processed into more developed food to be sent to different food outlets. I recruited a fantastic executive chef, and I never once went inside the kitchen, because I knew I couldn't add any value inside that kitchen. But those 25,000 meals still got produced, and I used it as an opportunity to surround myself with good people and to develop them. So it was really about, I think one of the key steps for any leader is to really understand the situation. It's about managing you, it's about managing others, and then it's about having a strategy that you are accountable for executing. So that was one of the big shifts in my first step of really having a responsible line management role, of understanding, okay, you're a lawyer and you've been asked to run the non-gaming side of Sky City, Auckland.
I like how the opportunity came about. Like, basically, you asked for more. I don't feel like I'm doing enough.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's something our leaders can learn.
Yeah.
Like in terms of like opportunities, professional development, if you want it, like you got to ask for it.
Yeah. And there was a risk I might not get it. But I knew that what I was doing wasn't enough for the property, and it wasn't enough for me. And I'd always had kind of an interest of going into line management and going from a private law firm into a corporate role, and then going into line management was part of my idea of a plan, I suppose, at the time. But it's important to speak up when you have a relationship with your boss. And I give my boss credit for this, because I'd done a good job. I interacted with people well. I was good to deal with, but I had no experience in the role. And so I probably backed my character and my values and my professionalism, I suppose, in terms of the general skills to be able to handle these different responsibilities. And so that's how the jump came. And I remember many lawyers approaching me 5 years after, how on earth did that happen? But it can happen. It can happen. And it's, as you say, I think it's important to speak up, and, it was part of my journey. I saw it as a step along the way.
Yeah, I love that. If basically what we learned from that is, if you want to be a leader and help run Sky City, get a law degree.
Well, and that's quite interesting, isn't it? Because a leader can come from any degree. People say, how do you become a leader? Or whatever. But
yeah.
What qualifications should I get? I think the most important qualification you have is understanding yourself. And you can come from, you have great leaders that are engineers. They've got many good leaders are engineers. So you can come from any discipline. And I think as you find your flow, what's your flow? How do you find your flow to actually, that gravity kind of has this ability, I think, of putting you in the right position to do what's right for you. But you can come from a wide range of different learnings or backgrounds or experiences. You don't have to have a law degree, and you don't have to have any degree. You know, leadership can come from anywhere, because I think it starts with character, and it starts with values.
Ooh, I love that. So that's a good segue. But I love what you said there. You know, the greatest qualification that anybody could ever get is to learn about themselves.
Yeah.
I love that. That's powerful. I just wanted to reiterate that for our audience. So I like what you just said there. Your finishing lines was, you know, I think good leadership starts with good values.
Yeah.
The foundation. But I also know that you believe that values is not enough to carry you in leadership.
No.
Like, you also need skills.
Yeah.
Tell us about that, like values and skills as leaders. Why is it important to have both?
Values give you a bedrock to help you make decisions, but they don't help you implement. And skills are about how you implement the decision that you want to implement. And so, but values are important, because, you know, when it's not clear, or it's just a load of fug out there and you don't know how it's going to, you know, what to do or where to do it, you just come back to your values, and you kind of use them to regroup and provide a bedrock. And then, you know, perhaps the skills at that point kick in, and that's about asking yourself the questions so that you really understand the situation that you're dealing with here. What is the situation here? Because leadership is about finding a match for a situation. It's about, you know, it's about, there's a commercial framework involved where you've got a business or something like that has particular challenges. The business will have a particular culture, and that culture may be working for or against the business achieving its degrees, or what it's trying to achieve. And then it comes down to the match. Is there a fit for your solution and you to what the business actually needs? So you often see leaders that can go from one environment into another, and they can be brilliant in one environment and then really struggle in another. And you often see that, for example, I think you see that quite commonly, sometimes the shift between commercial into full purpose. Full purpose organisations, I think, are very, very challenging for leaders, because they generally don't have the level of resources that commercial have. They're relying on people's smarts and guile to be able to achieve things with limited resources. And you often find for purpose organisations are filled with people very, very passionate about the cause. And that can work really well, but it can also be a challenge to overcome, to make sure that passion isn't clouding people's judgments at the same time. So, leadership is situational, and it's about really understanding, okay, what is the situation here? And and then you as a leader moves in to address the needs of that situation, but you have to diagnose the situation well, and you have to be very honest and true with yourself as to whether you've got the right skills and experience to be able to serve in that situation. Leadership is about managing yourself, managing people, and executing a plan and being accountable for delivery of that plan. And the first step of being a good leader, I think, is really understanding yourself. It took me a long time to understand myself, and that's okay. I eventually got there, I think. I'm still learning a bit more about myself every day. But I think when you understand yourself, you can, and how you behave, particularly when you're under pressure, is critical in terms of how effective you can be in managing others.
I love that. And I see that you keep coming back to situation, the situation, observing, assessing the situation, and then, how your values and your skills help in the situation, a particular situation as a leader. And it's important, I think, what you said there, like your values help you make decisions.
Yeah.
And sometimes people see values as, these are part of who I am.
Yeah.
So if honesty is one of my values, I believe I'm an honest person. Like, some people embed those values into their DNA almost. Like, this is a part of who I am.
Yeah.
And what you're saying is skills is not so much about who you are, but it's how you go about executing and implementing a result.
That's right. I've heard many sayings. You pick up comments that people have said along the way. And I remember one person saying, "People won't remember what you did; they'll remember how you how they fit.
Made them feel, yeah.
Yeah. Or, and that's an important one, I think, because it's important to, because that's a very values, I think it's very loaded with the values of sense. Did you see that person? Did you respect that person? So, a leader, the most valuable attributes a leader can have, I think, is if they can inspire trust and confidence of others in their leadership. And to achieve that, you've got to be authentic. You're allowed to make mistakes, It's not about perfection. I've got many scars, and each of those scars come from learning. And you go back to those learnings. So, how you've different experiences as you've gone. You can go back and say, well, I remember that didn't go quite so well. Perhaps I need to do this. And I've often gone back and used different experiences to help my thinking and how I might approach another situation. I remember one of the, about understanding yourself came very early on. I worked for a utility called United Networks, about 20 years ago now. And I really enjoyed working for United Networks, had a great team there, a great leader. We were doing really innovative and interesting things from a commercial perspective. And I was given the opportunity to go on one of those expensive overseas courses. And as part of that, I had to have a 360 done. And I had a 360 done. And
On yourself?
on myself. So all my teammates, my boss, the board members, things like that.
Feedback about this guy?
It was feedback, yeah. And then on the course, I was given the results of that feedback. And I was devastated by the results. And because I was someone who really thought, I was very reflective, and I'd go away and think about things. And I'd just keep my thoughts to myself, and then I'd go to the meeting to discuss it or whatever, and I'd pop this, nicely crafted, well thought through position, and people would be kind of going, where did that come from? And I was very proud of the thinking or whatever that I'd done, and I'd really thought it through, and I was genuine about that. But that approach didn't inspire trust and confidence of my teammates, because they thought, why didn't he share that with us, or something like that? And that was one of the most powerful lessons I had in terms of my own style, is to be reflective and to go away and think about things, and I'd quietly work out and teach myself about things, or I might have some conversations here and there, but not bringing people along on your thinking was a key learning for me out of that. And it wasn't because I was being deceptive or hiding things or anything like that. It was it's just my natural style. And I had to adapt that, be aware of the impact that style had on the way others perceived me. And because perception's everything.
Yeah. Well, that's why I said there's a difference between intention and interpretation.
Yeah.
You could have all the good intentions,
That's
but
right.
people might interpret it differently.
Right. Yeah.
So that's why I like the 360, or
Yeah.
I guess as a leader, using that as a tool, feedback,
Yeah.
to help you understand the situation better. Coming back to your whole
Yeah.
situational leadership,
Yeah.
like how you perceive or interpret the situation might not be actually what everyone else
That's right.
perceives.
That's
it.
right. That's
So
right.
it's important as a leader to step
Yeah.
back. What's actually going on here?
And that example I spoke about just then is an important one, because there were barriers to progressing the thinking, even if it was the right idea. I can't recall whether it was or not, but let's assume that it was the right solution. To progress it, you've actually, because of the way you went about it, you created an unnecessary barrier to advancing that work. And so, understanding the situation, it helps you navigate people.
Yeah.
People are complex. People are, we're really difficult. But and everyone's got their own different style and their own values as well. And as a leader, you're trying to navigate all those differences, as you weave the team together.
Nice, I love that. I'm still hanging on the concept of situational leadership.
Yep.
Because it's come about quite a few times now. Can you give us an example, even your own? I know you've given us a few, but where both your values and your skills actually helped you in a situation?
I think a good one is a more recent one. I was chair of the Child Fund Alliance, which is the global body for Child Fund. And it's an organisation that supports, I think, around 32 million people around the world in 71 countries. And I was chair of Child Fund New Zealand, and I was elected to be chair of Child Fund Alliance, which is a global board of 11 entities, not a solitary entity, so 11 different kind of members of this alliance. And I pretty quickly realised when I got on the board that there were some governance changes that were needed. Had to redesign how the organisation works so it could be more impactful at the front line. And I remember being very motivated by the task at hand. You know, the work they did, fantastic work, incredible work. Operating in places like Gaza and the Ukraine and things like that. And but I wasn't on the front line. I wasn't dealing with all that. So when you're in the governance role, you're kind of back trying to make sure that the systems and structures help the front line to do a better job, or help members to interact better with each other in that case. But I remember working with others, we developed a plan that we needed to go about this governance change, and it would change the way it'd have a smaller board, so less people on the board, which can always be quite complicated, or what voting rights should different parties have depending on their size. There was those sorts of complexities, and I remember coming out at a meeting overseas, and I came out pretty quickly, and I went back to that example of plopping my idea didn't learn, put my idea on the table, and immediately got a negative reaction and a pushback. And so my skills weren't quite aligned there. My values were. I had the skills to do the job. I was hoping to achieve it more quickly so we could get to the good bit faster. And it took 4 years. And just working away with individuals of building understanding of what we're trying to achieve, building trust and confidence with other members of the alliance. And we got there in the end. So it was one of the last things I did for them in terms of, we all signed off on this change, and it was probably the thing I'm most proud of. But it was kind of a culmination of a whole lot of experiences in managing people from Asia, from Europe, from some people very motivated by climate issues, other people very motivated by starvation and poverty and things like that. So it's the people with a whole raft of different personal motivations of how do you build an umbrella that they can all get under, and see that they still had their voice. That's what it's about. So yeah, we got there in the end. So that it was. I had learned that I had this particular style where I can actually think about things and rush off and implement. And I suspect there are many people like me that do that, because I like change. I really like change and improving things. I'm not so good at just managing the status quo. So yeah, that was one of those things where I took lessons from the past and eventually was able to align the values and the skills necessary to get that job done. I always had the skills, I just had to adapt them for the particular situation and understand who I was dealing with.
I love that. And thank you for sharing that example. I think one of the greatest lessons from that experience is you can't rush things as well.
No.
You could have the skills, you could have the values, but the context, the timing, the people.
If you want to bring people along with you, if you want sustainable change, something that will endure, you have to bring the people along with you. I always think that the best hallmark of a leader is to look back 6 months after they left and see what's still there.
Yeah, that's why I love it. Now it's all connecting for me a lot more clearer now in terms of like the situation. You had the values, you've had the skills, you had to adapt it, but the situation wasn't, in terms of the timing and all of that as well, the journey as well. I know we've talked about how values and skills are different, and values is a good foundation for a leader, character, but skills is what takes you further. Impact, result, implementation. Is there a way where values actually serve your skills and vice versa? Is there a bridge or a link between the two that can help you become a better leader?
I think if they're really your values, they cannot but influence the way you go about things. Because I think it's not necessarily what you do, as we said before, it's about how you do it. And often the difference between success and failure is about how you did it. How enduring is that change? You will never have enough skills to adapt to be effective in every situation. And with technological change, AI, demographic change in New Zealand is huge. And as leaders, we're being challenged more and more to really understand the diversity that sits in New Zealand. We're a hyper-diverse or super-diverse city now in Auckland. We have over people from 200 different ethnicities. They're part of the team as well. And how, for leaders, there will be, any leader going into an audience like that in any situation, you will learn something. You might not necessarily have the skills. And part of the learning is about putting yourself into a situation where it might be a bit scary or you might feel a little insecure. But if you approach it with your values and people can see that integrity and trust, they will engage with you. I've never found that not to be the case.
I love it. Where does someone start with knowing what their true values are? I know, people can look at a whole list and I resonate with that one, that one, that one. I like that one. I like that one. But like, how do you know what your core values are so that you could lead with it and bring it to the forefront a little bit more?
Well, I always felt a bit uncomfortable when organisations put their values up on the wall and things like that because, they are values, but values are really the things that you do. How do you extrapolate, describe your actions to a particular value? It comes back to your behaviours, and you will understand that better than anyone else in terms of honesty, trust, integrity, equity, inclusion. All these sorts of things become who you are by the actions that you do. So it's values, and values can shift. Values can change over time, through your experiences.
Is that a good thing?
It is a good thing. It's part of life. It's part of responding to life and learning. You might think, ABC is over here, and by the time, 20 years later, you might, no, that was all wrong. This is where it's really at. And I think your capacity to question yourself and question what you believe is a mark of a good leader as well, because that's all part of learning, isn't it? Our lives are full of different experiences, and learning from those experiences gives you skills to address other experiences. So we're living in a very challenging time for leaders because of the pace of change, both technologically and through demographic change. Quite apart from the geopolitical stuff that's going on, we've got a lot on our books anyway to operate effectively here in New Zealand.
Yeah. Are you seeing things from a macro point of view, values that make you feel like are being challenged and makes you feel uncomfortable at the same time? Like
Yes.
like values that you're like, man, that's not who we are, or that's like, yeah.
I've had instances of that in my career where I haven't done things because they haven't been it's not they were ethically wrong or they're legally wrong. So they can be your guardrails. But the pressure for a leader is to execute a strategy, isn't it? And the challenge is to execute the strategy while keeping your values intact and in place. So that comes back, well, how do you do that? How do you achieve that? You can take a shortcut, and that might ride across the interests of people, or it might be illegal or whatever it is. That's not going to work. or you actually learned a way to actually might be the longer way, might be more challenging, but it probably is the best way and the most sustainable way to achieve lasting change. So, that's how I that's where my feelings at. I have come across leaders that I've questioned ethics and so who you work for, who you work with, is actually a very important condition to becoming a good leader as well. I often think of students who've come out for their first job, and a lot of people will rush off to work for big companies or most reputable company or whatever that might be. If there are smaller companies that are out there with great people, I think the most defining impact of your early career is working for really good people that are competent in the profession. Mm-hmm. So you're getting good teaching, but you're also able to observe how they do it.
I love that. I think coming back to your point around values and, making decisions based on your values, whether that's deciding where to work or as a leader, who you let in through the front door as part of your team as well. I feel like if you're making decisions aligned with your values, you're just going to be a little bit more happier as well.
That is, you only go round once.
You only live life once. Yeah, that's what life is short.
So you better enjoy it while you're there, because there's nothing more tortured, I think, for seeing a leader that isn't operating in accordance with their own values. And I've actually had a chief executive that, when I was chair of an organisation, a chief executive resigned because they were uncomfortable with the sector that we were in. And I totally respected that. He was an outstanding leader. But then also to have the courage to actually say this isn't going to work for me anymore. I totally respected that. And he's gone on to bigger and better things, and we still meet regularly for lunch every so often, because it's you just respect that. He was an outstanding leader. So having the courage to know when to step back is all about leadership as well. So it might be values, or it might be skills. At that point, that situation comes back again. If things have changed, if an event has impacted a company's strategy, or something dramatic has happened that might not make you suitable to stay in that organisation, then you really need to test that question, and stepping back might be the right thing to do. Because you don't want to set yourself up in a way that you fail, because if you fail, the company also fails. And understanding when it's time to move on, I think, is important.
Yeah. Again, coming back to understanding the situation. And can we talk about, I got one more question around situation, and then I want to start talking about like what you're seeing out there in terms of the trends and stuff around with leaders, because you work with a lot of leaders. Yeah. So my last question around situational is some tips for our audience around how do they assess a situation effectively as a leader, and then respond accordingly based on their skills, etc.
Yeah, I think I'll come back to we said before, the first step for a leader is to know themselves, and I think it's really important. The sooner you can understand yourself, the better. To understand how you might react into a situation, or what you're passionate about, or what motivates you. What are the anchors in your life? You talked about, you implied before about family, the role of family, and the role of that. Understanding those trade-offs so you can live the life that you want to live. You can still be a leader and live the life you want to live. You just live in a way that enables you to do everything. But I think understanding who you are. Understanding what motivates the organisation, or what sort of role interests you. It might be in a commercial role, or it might be a for-purpose role. They're both entirely legitimate. I think as you progress, there's nothing better than just starting. Just start. If you have the values you say you have, then they will be demonstrated by your behaviours. If they're the right values, they will be. You'll be informed of that by the reaction you generate. While leading. But as you start, there's a lot of there's a lot of learning by just the experience. I came back and I made the comment earlier that I think a lot more could be done around leadership development, because I don't think enough is provided in New Zealand on leadership development. Is whenever we're in a recession or anything like that, the first thing that gets cut is the very thing that preserves a company's future. So if you have the opportunity to learn about leadership in a structured environment, in terms of learning about yourself, learning about how to manage others, learning about how to develop a plan, learning the importance of accountability and integrity and trust and confidence. A lot of people, these things just don't happen. They might happen, but in a pretty chaotic or informal sort of way. I think for people starting out on their careers when they start, I think, once you're out in the workforce, I think trying to get into a situation where you can do courses that can teach you about that, I think are very, very valuable. The course I went on where I had that 360 done was life-changing for me, because I thought like a lawyer before I went in, and I came back thinking like someone who could understand how the knee bone was connected to the leg bone, and the leg bone was connected to the foot in terms of how a company operated. All of a sudden you saw companies as a system, and they are systemic, and that each system is different. Some are well suited for you and others are not. And if you can work out how that occurs progressively over time, you'll enjoy your career more and more.
Yeah, nice. So you work with a lot of leaders
Yep.
through Weave Leadership, executives, senior leaders, right? Knowing the time that we live in now with AI, technology, the political climate,
Yep.
the geopolitical climate that's going on. What are you seeing right now is like for leaders, like are the top skills that they must have to help lead now and into the future?
We come back, the food of chiefs is communication. I think the ability to communicate clearly, so people understand what's expected of them, what the goal is, or what role they're going to play in that pursuit. I think that is critical. The ability to synthesize things into simple, easily articulated objectives, so people understand what the objective is and how they fit into it. Keeping it really clear, understanding how accountability will be for that, how to empower groups of people, and how to hold that space with empathy along the way. Because with this, it's not about being liked or being or being people's friends, but that ability to actually have empathy and have insight into how all these different people that we live and work with these days, what's important to them and what are the things they may need to be more effective in their roles is important. And situations sometimes where that people can't articulate what they do need. So being clear about the objectives, making sure people have the resources they need, empowering people to do it. I think the ability to empower and not to micromanage is critical. And then to stay close enough to see how tasks are being performed, and ultimately to help keep things on track. So accountability is important. You have a lot of organisations that can have a beautiful strategic plan and they do their offsites and things don't change, and you really got to ask the question, well, why are things not changing? That's where accountability kicks in. So leadership, as your leadership grows, so does accountability. And I think for leaders these days, that comes back to the ABC. There's no kind of magic in all of that. But we're operating in an environment where it's pretty stressful out there for businesses and for individuals, and the ability to keep people motivated and inspired If you want high performance, you have to understand people at a more granular level, I think, these days than we have before. And that diversity kicks in because, how do you keep people of different faiths, different ethnicities, might be a cultural festival or something like that, the ability to understand what people's needs are or what is important to those people. Businesses always want to simplify things. And HR departments always like to put out policies. And you do have to have policies, but you also have to have managers that can manage people within an area of discretion that enables those managers to see their people and to ensure that they're engaging with them in a way that helps them maintain that level of performance that they're seeking.
Yeah, I love that. As you were talking about that, I thought about my own experience here as education, and our values. Everyone's part of the reason why some of the people join our business, our team, is because they're like, I love education's mission. I love the story. I feel like our values align. I want to work here. And then, we reached a point where like, we're getting along, but like we need to achieve results. We've got to put food on the table. We've got clients, like we impact and all of that. So I had to develop communication. I had to develop, in addition to the systems and all that, I had to develop accountability. So this is where I realized, cool, like if I'm going to hold a team accountable, what am I holding them accountable to?
Yeah.
So that's when I said, cool, we need strategy, we need KPIs, we need goals, and we need to be able to measure this weekly, and we need to be able to report this to this. So we all see like, this is the dashboard, this is where we are, this is the goal, this is the gap. Then the accountability part, and people get scared when they hear accountability. They think punishment. It's not.
Yeah, no.
Accountability is like, let's reassess where we are and then ask the questions.
Yeah. Well, ideally, it's about the team holding itself to deliver on its plan. This is our plan. Why is it, if we're not quite achieving it, what's going wrong? What can we do better? What can we do better? Yeah. I read a piece recently about entrepreneurs and, often great companies are those that are relentlessly asking that question, what can we do better? They're not complacent. They understand what their mission is. They're not complacent about, they might be the leader in the market, but they're just not complacent, and they keep seeking to stretch and to better themselves and compete better.
I love that. Powerful question, eh? But it does so many wonders. What can we do better? And I like that, because if we come back to values and skills again, values is more about who you are, your character, how you make decisions. It's like, how can I be better? You develop yourself, your values, and then what can I do better? It's more around skills oriented.
Yeah, that's right. And as a leader, depending on the role you're playing in the project, say, what's the role the leader's playing in the project? What are the really important things you need to pay attention to? Because you can't do everyone's job for them. Or it's about what's really important for me as the leader to make sure this project's going to be successful. And if you can identify, once again, going back to the situation, me as leader, what does that mean? Is about really understanding there might be some additional skills you need. You might need to learn up more on AI or whatever it might be. There may be technological skills that you need to better knowledge that you understand how something may impact this situation. But I think, skills, that comes back to that lifelong journey. The diversity of people, the pace of change, technological change, that's constantly creating conditions where leaders have to keep learning. So that question you posed before about what can I do better? Good leaders ask that question the whole time. And they might get it wrong, and when you do get things wrong, and I've got plenty of scars myself, when you do get things wrong, you learn, you really learn. And as they say, failure often is the best teacher.
Best teacher, exactly. What I'm seeing now, the link is like, obviously, how do you know what skills you need for the situation? How do you, values somewhat don't really change as much, like the why and what I stand for. But it's more like, what are the skills that require me for this particular situation?
And who needs to hold those skills? As a leader, it comes back to that point of, what are the skills you might need as a leader to run that project, but it doesn't mean that you have to have all the skills.
Exactly.
And it comes back to, okay, we need to have someone very experienced with these competencies and this sort of experience. You go and recruit them, or you identify someone within the team that has that. So that situational analysis is important, and those skills may be, you will have a certain set of skills to support the task that you have to perform, and then everyone else in the group needs to have the skills that are required to deliver the task that you're expecting of them.
Yeah.
So the great thing about that is that, some modern management theories now have people moving from different projects the whole time, and that fluidity, I think, will continue in business. We've come from an environment which was almost military in terms of the top-down structure. If you look at the last 100, 200 years of management theory, it's been quite military, and people didn't move. Now things are pretty fluid, and talent is very mobile these days as well. So, you may have people with great skills. If you don't look after them, they'll go. And people's attitude to their jobs are changing as well. This is the whole post-COVID area in terms of working from home and the importance of that. The whole tussle around that is, I think, almost a clash of generations. So the mobility of talent these days, particularly in New Zealand, where there's opportunities across the Tasman or just down the road, that mobility of talent is important, and the thing that locks it in is whether they're motivated and inspired by the work that they're doing. People go and die in wars for a medal. They don't get paid. And so I think the art of leadership is about really getting people involved in a common project that motivates and inspires them, and they feel seen and valued, and they want to be part of a great team.
Yeah. With your Weave leadership and, bringing people together, what are you seeing as some of the most common challenges that you're seeing amongst leaders now these days?
You do see people coming through promotion, particularly in New Zealand, where there's, we're a small economy at the end of a long line, where you have people with particular technical or functional skill sets that have kind of just suddenly emerged and end up being the next person to be appointed as country manager or chief executive or whatever the role might be. And I think it comes back to getting that balance right between technical competencies and leadership competencies. Leadership in a functional area is different from leadership at an enterprise level, and we have a lot of companies that are owned by offshore entities, and sometimes leaders in New Zealand aren't given the opportunities, quite the opportunities, because we're a smaller part of a small cog in a bigger wheel, so to speak. So that can emerge from time to time, and we've had several members that joined Weave at a time when they just became a chief executive, and we just helped provide a forum where they were surrounded by other leaders and they were learning from them, and they were able to ask questions in a safe environment, and their leadership, they grew more and more comfortable into their role, and they understood where their boundaries were and where their limitations were and where the opportunities were. One of our members recently said, Simon, I've been coming for over 5 years now, and she said, "You know why I come?" And she came at a time when she had just been appointed a chief executive. And she said, "I come because I might look at the agenda for the meeting and I'll think, oh God, what's Simon thinking now?" And I try to get topics that are on the radar but they don't get to. And she said, I come because even when I am looking at the agenda and thinking, oh God, what's this going to be about? I walk away from that meeting with a little gold nugget. And it'll either be a gold nugget for me as a leader or it'll be a gold nugget for my business. And so they set aside 2 hours of their day every month. We have breakfast beforehand and then 2 hours afterwards for a facilitated conversation with experts. And all of a sudden the penny drops. And often I'm just chairing these sessions as a host, really. Throw the odd grenade in there so often to get the conversation going in a particular way. But the real learning comes from people sharing. And in that group, these groups of 10 or 12 people, they get really high trust and confidence in each other. So it's networking while you're not really networking, if you get what I mean. And they will share some of the biggest challenges that they've ever faced, and people will workshop that. So, yeah, I think leaders, where they have those gaps, and everyone has gaps, it's about, do you understand how to address that gap, And that can be about your own personal wellness. Sometimes the mental load for leaders is such that it is impacting family or it is impacting their own performance. How do they ground themselves to do another week? I go for a walk on Takapuna Beach every weekend, and I started walking my dog, and then the dog died 2 years ago, and I'm still walking on it. And it was a beautiful dog, but it was it's just part of that ritual that you get in terms of giving yourself space. We go at sunrise and we see the sun come up with a group of friends, and we just chat away about all the terrible things that are happening in the world every week. But it's part of that grounding and connection process. So looking after yourself and finding your group of people that you can share those challenges. So, Weave kind of provides that, and we get a range of people from different sectors, and they suddenly realise that the challenges that they've got are actually quite common. So we get people from different sectors, so there's no conflicts of interest or anything like that, and people can speak openly. But that ability to learn and share experiences with each other is very affirming and very, powerful. It's often the third place, I think, where people can go and they develop a fantastic set of people that they can call upon if they have particular issues. Or they might come to me and say, Simon, I've got this problem. What do you reckon? And I'll give them 3 names to ring, and I never tell them what to do. But I say, here are 3 different people who could help you with that problem. You work out who's the best and what the best fit is. So I'm focused on the individuals and supporting them in their roles with their businesses. So that's why I don't consult into any of the members' businesses. I just stay away. That's their task.
That's theirs. Yeah, your job's just to give them gold nuggets, walk away and get. I love that. This is a nice way to kind of wrap up the podcast on a high note, and it comes back around what you're doing with Weave Leadership, just creating a community where people can share. Sharing is caring. They feel cared when they can share, learn from others, and it comes back to your whakatauki around how the food for chiefs is communication, and you hold that space for them to communicate, and then the job of a chief is to weave it. And I think of connection. Yeah, and it sounds like basically
weave the people together,
and that's Weave Leadership. Yeah. So thank you for you've just unloaded and shared so much gold nuggets on our podcast today. And if there's one thing that you want our audience to take away from our conversation, what would that be?
Start. Get out there and start being your leader. How do you lead? And start learning from that. Because I think, and look for opportunities for leadership. I think there are often opportunities to contribute more than you might be doing in your role. And some of those opportunities operate in the community. And if you're passionate about something that a community body is doing, help out, volunteer. And you will, it's as a volunteer leader, and getting more responsibility and taking on more and more opportunities present themselves. So I do see leadership as operating across commercial and for purpose entities, and you can learn a lot in commercial that you can apply in for purpose, and you can learn a lot in for purpose that you can apply in commercial. and that's and you'll be surprised at where you end up in terms of the basket of skills that you've got, because they end up being quite adaptable to a whole range of different situations, and you're anchored by your values. So, start. Just get out there. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. And there's leadership exists in every organisation. Be a leader and understand, what's required for the team to do better. And how can I have more influence? How can I contribute more? That's how it happens. Promotion comes from actually doing the task you're trying to apply for, because promotions or recruitment are very risk averse, generally quite risk averse. But if you start doing a lot of the tasks of the role that you want, just quietly learning them, it helps. It puts you in as a very good candidate. So start. Nothing's stopping you.
Just start. Yeah. Some good final words here from Simon Whyte. Thank you again. Such an amazing conversation. Really enjoyed it. Wishing you all the best. Simon Whyte, founder of Weave Leadership. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Pasi.
Thank you for tuning in to the Education Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to follow and subscribe for more episodes like this.